Now we move towards our next speaker, Sri Bhakti Vijnan Muni Maharaj. My humble dandavat pranam to Sri Bhakti Vijnan Muni Maharaj. He is the president of Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Institute. Sri Bhakti Vijnan Muni Maharaj received a PhD in chemical engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, and he also published peer-reviewed papers and book chapters in international conference and journal like Springerling. He is the president of Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Institute, and he is based in West Bengal, India. He is an Vaishnava monk. Now, Sri Bhakti Vijnan Muni Maharaj is going to present on philosophy of super soul from Paramatma Sandarbha. Now we are going to hear from Sri Bhakti Vijnan Muni Maharaj. I request
Thank you for that introduction. So is my slide shared already?
Yes, Maharaj.
It is shared.
Okay, fine. So this Paramatma Sandarbha is a scholarly text written by one of the very famous Vaishnava acharyas, that is a spiritual or a devotee of Krishna consciousness movement. They are originally known as the six famous Goswamis or six saints who flourished in Vrindavan about 500 years ago. And in this particular book, Paramatma Sandarbha, the word Paramatma means the super soul. And he has given in great details the various theological terminologies involved about how this universe came into being, and further, what is the position of the living entities, what is the position of the super soul, and what is the principle of non-duality. Fine. So this is a picture, very old kind of painting that we can see. There are three of those personalities, Rup, Sanatan, and Jiva Goswami. So Jiva Goswami was the youngest of all the three, and he was the disciple of Rupa Goswami. So I have already explained that the content of this book. Now, there are a large number of topics, but I have selected only a few of them. Especially, what are the symptoms of the living being, Jiva Lakshana? What is this Paramatma? What is this Shetru? That means the field of activity for this living entity. That is the Kshetra, and Kshetragya means the knower of that field. How this field of body is working, and so this is a very important topic. And finally, the relation of how the universe with that subjective process of that creation of the universe. Actually, the universe has been compared in our literature to be like a tree, and then it also compared to a forest. That means in the beginning, it is like a seed, and it develops by the principles of like development. Whereas in modern science, due to the application of physics, they have a very impersonal idea of the origin of universe, and they think that in the beginning there was only an impersonal energy, and by the application of Big Bang and other processes, the universe came to be what it looks like today. But in the Vedic conception, the personal conception is there from the very beginning. So on the other hand, modern science would like to believe somehow personality or consciousness arose by certain combinations, but that is directly, not in harmony with the Vedic idea. And finally, the Advaita Tattva, the principle of non-duality. So this is the picture of Krishna, and Krishna is said to be the Advaita Tattva, that is the non-dual truth. So Krishna is the principle of non-dual consciousness. He is the root object of devotion and treasured object of service for all. So this is the basic understanding. And in that, when these verses are invoked, there is a particular Gayatri mantra that is called Satyam Param Dhimahi. Dhi means to meditate, and this particular word Dhimahi is actually not a singular word, but a plural form. And what it means is that it is an invocation to all living beings to meditate on that absolute truth or God. So by plural form, it means all living beings of all time, place, and traditions are included and are advised to be taught in the process of meditation on the supreme truth. Fine. So, jiva lakshana, the symptoms of the living entities. First of all, the living entity, the jiva, is a subject, is a person. He has knowing capacity. He is sentient. Transcendental means he is not created by time, space, matter, and energy, but is transcendental to all of these categories. He is unborn, means he is not, doesn't come into being by some combination of the material energies. So in that sense, he is very subtle. And not only that, he is eternal. And Chidananda Swarup means he is of the form of consciousness and fulfillment. And he has a self-identity, he is imperishable, and is the knower, is one of the knowers in this field of the body. That means actually it is a field of consciousness. So it cannot be burnt, killed, or reducible to something more simple. In this way, it is constituted with these qualities which are also that of Parameshwara. That means the Supreme Lord is also similar qualities. That means he is eternal. He is also of the form of that is consciousness. But there are also some differences, and those are the subject matter of our study. So therefore, the transcendental jiva has been addressed with the word, in the word Om, the Bija mantra, Om is there. In that word, the Ma, it indicates the living entity, and it indicates that he is eternal servant of Lord. Now, the living entity has the possibility to be illusioned by the Maya Shakti of Lord. So it is eligible to be covered, that is the living entity's consciousness, because it is very minute, and this Maya energy is very powerful, so it can cover that potency, that consciousness. So that means when the living entity becomes enamored by the illusory potency, which is called Maya, and embraces it, then it serves that Maya or illusory energy by its bodily senses and forgets its original form and becomes attached to this external nature, which is this Prakriti or this material external thing which he comes to know through his mind and senses. So this entanglement is called samsara. That means he becomes caught up in the cycle of birth and death. Now, the thing is that origin of this illusory potency is also in the Lord. It is one of the inconceivable potencies. That means if one tries to understand this through only mind and senses, then he will not be able to understand that. So its activity is through some potency called avidya. Avidya means ignorance. That means ignorance of its own self in relation to God. And he thinks himself to be this body. And in this way, he becomes forgetful of his original self-identity. In this position, he experiences some worldly happiness and distress. Nature of that Maya potency is that it is threefold quality. And it comes in differentiated form. Sometimes its threefold form has been said like this. Adhyatmika means related to self and body. Adhi-bhautika means it is related to something, the other entities, and adhi-daivika means something which is related to the concepts or the higher authorities of nature. And in this way, it produces varieties of distinct determinations. And then an example can be taken. In the process of seeing, we say the eye is the form of the adhyatmika. And what we are seeing through eye, some objects, their form is the adhi-bhautika. And we know that we need some sunlight to see the objects. So that sun that enters the ball of the eye is adhi-daivika. So these three are distinct from each other, yet the sun in the sky is self-situated. That means it is not dependent upon, for example, our eye or our to be where it is. So in this by that simile example, it has been stated that the position of the Atma or the soul is also that it is the cause of all these three functions of this adhyatmika, etc. And yet he is different from all these causes, and therefore it has its own capacity to illuminate these other illuminating agencies. That means we are thinking that we are seeing through the eye, we are taking the sunlight to see the things, etc. But if there was no consciousness, if there was no Atma or the self, then there would be no conception of things. So therefore, with this soul or Atma has been stated to be self-illuminating. Then this Atma is unborn and it produces consciousness. It is a source of consciousness. Now, we have to understand what is this living entity, what is its capacities. So there are large number of qualities are mentioned, but we will take one or two of them. First thing is that the living entity jiva can distinguish between the activity of self and that of the others. This type of differentiating ability is called prakash. Objects which are not dependent on others for their activity. So they are, for example, the living entity can know things by their own activity. And in this way, they are called swayam prakash, self-acting. Now, the objects like pots cannot express themselves, for example. The knowledge of such objects requires an external knower. However, such objects contribute to knowability by the ashraya or the subject, by their attributes. That means the objective, the material side is also contributing to knowledge. But without the Atma or the subject, there will be no possibility of any conception. So therefore, the Atma, Jiva, is also a knower of itself. This is the other thing. The Atma can know itself. Whereas can we ask the question, can a rock know itself? So that is a distinction. So Jiva can therefore know itself or refer to itself. This, that is Jiva, is also subject to itself. Therefore, Atma is non-matter. It possesses self-determination capacity. That is, it is not governed merely by the laws, but it has its own free will. So in nature, it seems, as science sees, everything is governed by necessity. That means cause laws. But it is not able to understand what free will is, because free will looks like complete antithesis to laws of nature. But we see the activity of free will all around us as far as life is concerned. It is there in the bird when it is flying or sitting in a particular branch. It is there when a tortoise comes out of its position and begins to walk. The free will is everywhere. And what are the equations to explain that? So definitely free will is not under the category of some law. So therefore, although the jiva is expressed by Paramatma in jagat, jagat means the universe, the jiva is being expressed by certain process, by the supersoul in this world, but still it is not like some inanimate object. An inanimate object always requires an external subject for its objectivity. But the living entity is also objective to itself. So Atma is the form of consciousness. Just like a lamp gives light to other spaces, similarly Atman, due to its consciousness capacity, can enlighten other bodies. The capacity to enter into other non-conscious objects is in a very subtle way, is called vyaptishilata. That means it can know the other. Consciousness is the capacity of the Atman. Similarly, the living entity is opposed to non-consciousness. It can overcome sorrows or distress due to its capacity for ananda or fulfillment. This is another quality of this Atma. So it is, first of all, it is truth. It participates in truth. It is conscious, and it searches for fulfillment. So these are the attributes of personality or the subject. So therefore, for every created being, the dearmost thing is certainly his own self. That means in the material position, we can find everyone is self-centered. The dearness of everything else, children, wealth, and so on, is due only to the dearness of the self. Soul is self-centered. He is more attached to his own body and self. Indeed, for persons who think the body is the self, those things whose importance lies only in the relationships to the body are never as dear as the body itself. And this is a quotation from Bhagavatam. Now, some philosophers in India have tried to say that the living entity is like a reflection of the absolute truth, which they call Brahman. But this has been denied by Srila Jiva Goswami. He says that Jiva is not a pratibimba or reflection of the absolute or the Brahman. For example, just like the sun is removing the darkness of the universe, Atma comes to know the world of objects by the activity of consciousness. Just like a lamp is not different from its potency of light, the Atma is also not different from its consciousness. Yet Atma is unborn and generates consciousness by which it comes to know body, its field of activity. Atma is by its very nature, Chaitanya Swarupa, means the form of consciousness. And therefore, by its consciousness, it comes to know itself and other bodies. This capacity is called vyasti shilata, means to pervade, like to move in. So what it means is that actually the living entity is not a reflection of the Brahman, but rather this is an activity of the Shakti, the energy of the absolute truth. So absolute truth is defined in terms of energy and energetics. So the energy can transform. That means the soul can due to its minuteness, be overpowered by the material energies and think that it is something like a material. And this is because of its minuteness, and because this overpowering energy is also Lord's energy, it is very powerful, and in the non-surrendered conditions, this possibility is always there. So therefore, this material body is temporary, like everything in this world is temporary. But the Atma identifies itself with that material body. As long as Atma identifies itself in the three qualities of material nature, it experiences this material variegatedness. Up to that time, it is bound by this external nature. So this identification of self in nature or Prakriti is produced due to false ego. Or false ego means to see everything in relation to the self, or particularly to see the self as the body, because he is forgetful of the relations of the absolute to everything. So he thinks everything is in relation to him, and that's why he's seeing himself as the body. Seeing itself as the center, and therefore produces self relations in the external nature or this material nature, Prakriti. Because of his forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of material energy as his field of activities, and thus actuated, he wrongly applies his activities to himself. So, for example, we cannot say how our hand is moving, how our legs are moving, how the organs are doing so many actions, but we think that we are doing somehow. But actually, according to the Vedic conception, these are all the actions, activities of the nature, the material nature. But the living entity is identifying itself with that and thinking that he is the doer. So this is his misconception. So therefore, we have to very much analyze what is this ego, or what does he think of himself. That is a very important question. And so it is mentioned that this ego is of two types. First is the Sarupbhuta, means his original ego, And the second type of ego is the prakriti aham bhav. That is the ego produced due to identification with the material nature. So that Swarubhuta, the original ego, that is, he thinks himself in relation to the absolute truth. But in material nature, he thinks that he is that he identifies himself with the material body. So just as one may imitate persons when one sees them dancing and singing, similarly the soul, although never the doer of material activities, becomes captivated by the material intelligence and is thus forced to imitate its qualities. That means the soul is producing consciousness and it is becoming attached to the material uh, activities, the actions of material nature, and then it is by its consciousness, it becomes bound to that material life. So in Bhagavatam, in detail, it is being mentioned that therefore the living entity is in distress regarding his identity, self-identity. And actually, he has no factual background here, like a man who dreams that his head is cut off. Within this world, whatever is perceived by the mind, speech, eyes, or other senses is me alone. That is, everything is the energy of the Lord which is acting. In that sense, because he is not different from his energy, therefore, the Lord here expresses that it is his energy which is being perceived by everybody. And there is nothing besides me. All of you, please understand this by a straightforward analysis of the facts. The mind has a natural proclivity to enter into material sense objects, and similarly, sense objects also enter into the mind. But both this material mind and sense objects are merely designations that cover the spirit soul, who is part and parcel of me. A person who has thus achieved me by understanding that he is not different from me realizes that the material mind is lodged within the sense objects because of constant sense gratification, and that the material objects are existing prominently within the material mind. Having understood my transcendental nature, he gives up both material mind and its objects. Further, when we talk about consciousness, there are at least four kinds of consciousness, but generally we experience three kinds: the waking, sleeping, and deep sleep. So these are the three functions of intelligence, and they are actually caused by the modes of material nature. That means there are three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And according to the modes which a particular consciousness is experiencing, material nature also acts differently according to the particular type of consciousness he has. So the living entity within the body is ascertained to possess characteristics different from these three states. That means the living entity is neither the one he thinks himself while waking or while sleeping or deep sleep. So he exists as a witness to them. So the spirit soul is trapped in the bondage of material intelligence, which awards him constant engagement in illusory modes of nature. But the Lord says, I am the fourth stage of consciousness, beyond wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep. Becoming situated in me, the soul should give up the bondage of material consciousness. At that time, the living entity will automatically renounce the material sense objects and the material mind. The false ego of the living entity places him in bondage and awards him exactly the opposite of what he really desires. Therefore, an intelligent person should give up his constant anxiety to enjoy material life and remain situated in the Lord, who is beyond the functions of material consciousness. Now, what is this equal vision that is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita? The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, he can see with equal vision a learned person, a gentle Brahman, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. O great sage, as soon as I got taste of the personality of Godhead, my attention to hear of the Lord was unflinching. And as my taste developed, I could realize that it was only in my ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle coverings, for both Lord and I are transcendental. So the living entity is also not a product of this material nature, neither Lord is a product of material nature. Both are transcendental. So this is the subject matter of study for the Vedantists. Now there are distinctions also, and there are identity also. Both aspects are there. it is said that the energy is Bhedabhed Prakash. Bhedabhed means, Bheda means distinction, Abhed means identity. So our philosophy says that it is unity in distinction. So how does this distinction arise? Just like the air is one, but when it enters the fluid and is forced out of the holes, it produces the different musical notes and thereby becomes differentiated. In this way, differentiation is the activity of the energy of the absolute or self-determination, and this preserves the unity of reality in this process. The living entities are actually infinitesimal in quantity. In that way, they are different from the Lord, and yet in quality, like when we talk about eternity or search for fulfillment and for of the nature of consciousness, they are qualitatively also the same. So both aspects are there. And idea of identity, the living entities are very subtle. Among things possessing qualities, here Lord is in Bhagavad Gita is mentioning that among things possessing qualities, he is the primary manifestation of nature. And among great things, he is this total material creation. And among subtle things, he is the spirit soul. And of the things that are very difficult to conquer, he is the mind. So Lord is identifying himself with each and everything, all realities. But at the same time, he also says that he is distinct from all of them. In that sense, the logic is energy and the energetic. Like we cannot separate the fire from its heat. Both are, we have to, as soon as we talk about fire, we must talk about heat also. But yet, as conceptually, fire and heat also are distinct. So this is unity in distinction. So jiva, living entity, is therefore eternal part and parcel. This is the conception of the organic whole. So supposed authorities who declare that matter is the origin of existence, that the permanent qualities of the soul can be destroyed, and that the self is compounded of separate aspects of spirit and matter, or that material transactions constitute reality, all such authorities base their teachings on mistaken ideas that hide the truth. The dualistic conception that the living entity is produced from the three modes of material nature is simply a product of ignorance. Such a conception has no real basis in you, for you are transcendental to all illusions and always enjoy perfect total awareness. The living entities in the conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. For this reason, the jiva cannot become all-pervading or all-knowing. The jivas are controlled by the Lord, means the Lord is a niyanta, controller. Further, the source of all these entities is also the Lord. Since the Lord is therefore the material cause, means upadan, of the embodied entities, he is also therefore their ultimate controller. And here actually this is about the material world or the universe that stays, because we have to ask how this the ingredients of material energy is coming, and how this the efficient cause, how they are processed to form this so many different manifestations. So here it is said that although Lord is cause of all causes, but what we say the material cause as well as the efficient cause, they are actually dependent upon the Lord. So they are not independent of him. So he is also therefore the ultimate controller. So the metaphor is there. The Lord is compared to the sun, and the innumerable living entities are compared to the individual sun rays. So that means the sun and the sun rays are not different, yet the sun rays are infinitesimal when compared to the sun. So therefore, this nature is an inferior energy of Lord, because it lacks consciousness. Originally, before the Prakriti becomes manifest, it exists in the stage of pradhana, where this subject-object differentiation has not yet begun to take place. But by the Lord's action, when he enters into that, then gradually all this objectivity arises in this material world. So therefore, distinct from these living entities, that is, the living entities constitute the Lord's superior energy. The living entity is the marginal potency because he is transcendental to Maya Shakti. That means there is Lord's internal potency, Lord's external potency with his material nature, and the living entity's position is in between. That is, it is in the borderline. However, that means he has a possibility to become enamored by the material energy, or he has a possibility to become servant of God. Both possibilities are existing in him. So therefore, we have to know the difference between Jivatma and Paramatma. Actually, the Paramatma is the Supreme Lord. We have studied in the beginning. Krishna is the absolute truth. Now, the Krishna has many expansions. He expands in two main forms, svamsa and vijnanamsa. Svamsa means his subjective plenary portions. Just like a lamp, from that one lamp, we can lighten many lamps, all of equal potencies. But there is an original lamp. So Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, but he can expand in many forms, subjective expansions. So for the purpose of the creation of the universe, he has three such incarnations. They are called purusha incarnations. They are known as Mahavishnu, Sarvadakshay Vishnu, and Paramatma. This Paramatma although he is unlimited and he's full of all potencies, but his movement is in the material world, because in the material world he comes as the witness, the sanctioner, the maintainer, etc. So therefore, even though the Vaikuntha is situated in Vaikuntha, but he is fully capable, and yet he is to be seen as a limb of the absolute, that is Krishna, Bhagavan. And he is therefore known as jagat-gata. That means his movement is within the material nature in this, where the living entities are enjoying or trying to exploit the material resources of material energy. But this Paramatma is not affected by the material nature. He is pure. He is pure self-form. That means he is fully spiritual and has nothing to do with, he is not touched by the material energy. Therefore, the explanation is that the Brahman or the absolute truth does not transform. He is antaryami, means he is indweller. He knows everything from within. And his chit sambandha means that is, the spiritual world is called chit vilas, and material world expands through the material, process. So chit means he's conscious, he's fully conscious, and he's the all-knowing personality. Now, in the process of creation of so many living entities, so we have this topic of Brahma, and Brahma, by the agency of Maya is the efficient cause, he makes this secondary universal creation. However, both this supersoul and living entity are of the form of Chit, the form of transcendental reason. But the jiva and the other Chit, that is the other Chit Rupa, means this one Chit Rupa is the Lord, the other is the living entity, but living entity becomes attached to Maya. And after that, it is experiencing the many results of happiness and pain arising due to karma or fruitive activities. When this illusion is removed, then it is seen that both Paramatma and Jiva are of the transcendental nature. In that way, they are equal, samana dharma. Although that living entity is dependent, or the shakt, or the Bhedabhed means unity in distinction with Paramatma. This illusion makes the living entities become designated into humans, demigods, demons, etc. But these differences are not seen in the purified stage. In the purified state, living entity attains to Paramatma Sarupya. That means some form of equality. That stage is called moksha or liberation. For example, the Lord says, by becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to transcendental nature, which is like my own nature. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation, nor disturbed at the time of dissolution. So we have to know also the difference between this living entity and super soul. That is, I have already mentioned energy and energetic. The principle is organic whole or unity in distinction. Obeisances from the front, from behind, from all sides. O unbounded power, you are master of limitless might. You are an all-pervading, and thus you are everything. My dear friend, I, the super soul, and you, the living individual soul, are not different in quality, for we are both spiritual. In fact, my dear friend, you are qualitatively not different from me in your constitutional position. Just try to consider this subject. Those who are actually advanced scholars who are in knowledge do not find any qualitative difference between you and me. As a person sees reflections of his body in a mirror to be one with himself and not different, whereas others actually see two bodies, so in our material condition in which the living being is affected and yet not affected, there is difference between God and the living entity. That means here we are experiencing material life, but God does not ever experience that material life like us. He only is a witness to. So in this way, both swans, that means the living entity, and the Paramatma, super soul, live together in the heart. When one swan is instructed by the other, he becomes situated in his constitutional position. This means he regains his original Krishna consciousness, which was lost because of his material attraction. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal, fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they're struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. The gigantic universal form of the Supreme Lord is the first incarnation and plenary portion of the Super Soul. He is a self of an unlimited number of living entities, and in him rests aggregate creation, which thus flourishes. So, we have already discussed that the position of the soul is marginal. That means he comes in the middle position between the internal potency of Lord and the external potency. So this marginal potency has again two divisions. Those who are favorably serving the Lord are called Bhagavat Unmukha. And the living entities who are ever serving Supreme Lord from time immemorial. This is because being in knowledge or ignorance of their relation to God as servants. So in the first category, that means those who are favorably serving, they are under the internal potency of God. And because they are only matter, the body, the life airs, the external and internal senses, the five gross elements and subtle sense for objects cannot know their own nature, the nature of other senses or the nature of their controllers. But the living being, because of its spiritual nature, Sandarbha is talking about the position of living entity within the material world, and then its transcendental position again when it is in the liberated stage, and further it goes into the stage of devotional realization. So, but as what to say, residents of this material nature, we must begin from discussing the questions of the body, mind, senses, etc., and the relation to the how those subjective principles are acting to produce this whole creation. So I think if you can, I can conclude here if you want, and if some questions are there, I can take up.
Yes. If there are no questions, then Dr. Roslenbroich, I wonder if you'd be willing to present your discussion now instead of in the next session. Is there any possibility that you'd be willing to do that?
Yes, that would be possible. No problem. If you want. Yeah, that's good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. So should I just start or?
I will just introduce you.
Yeah, okay.
So please give me one moment. Okay.